I firmly believe there is an effort to not let us see the true face of Jesus Christ. Because if you don't see his face on earth and recognize what he looks like now, you might be shocked when you get to heaven. And why? Because heaven, as a Catholic, is understood as the beatific vision, right? You all know this. The beatific vision is when we look at Jesus, when we look at God face to face for all eternity. And as I was teaching a class when I was a young seminarian about the beatific vision to a bunch of third graders, one kid raised his hand and I said, "Yes, Johnny, what do you have to say?" And he said, "You mean heaven is looking at God for all eternity, face to face for all eternity?" I said, "Yes, isn't that amazing?" He said, "That sounds boring." And I guess that would be boring if you're looking at someone who is boring. But Jesus ain't boring. And I think, again, there is an effort to not help us recognize and see his face. And you all sang it like 5 times. Lord, make us turn to you. Show us your face, and we shall be saved. So I watched, spoiler alert, I watched the Netflix special on Mary. If you have Netflix, just cancel it. And if you have Netflix and you want to watch it, don't. It's just not worth it. I also saw the movie Conclave. That'll be another homily. But in this particular instance, I was a little disappointed because in order to be kind of theatrical and to get people going, you also had to have some drama in it. And I've got to be honest with you, whenever Hollywood tries to portray Jesus, it sometimes falls flat because the people who are maybe writing, producing, or even acting might not be believers. And so in that case, they're always putting on a presumption of what they think Jesus might be like, or Mary for this case. And that's why I enjoy, to some degree, the Chosen series. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's free. You can just buy the app and you can watch it. And all that is really a meditation or what they call a contemplative approach to what Jesus would have been actually like. And why am I even talking about this? Because none of us have actually seen the face of Christ, but we kind of know through history what he might have looked like. So next year, I'll be going to Rome for the canonization of Blessed Carlo Acutis. Then I'm going to take a trip up north, and we're going to end by seeing the Shroud of Turin. And what's interesting is that there are these local guides there who are experts, and I'm saying that in air quotes, because they're actually saying, "Oh, but that's not really a traditional face of Jesus, and it was a painting." They're honestly so embarrassing to listen to because they're just spouting out stuff that they probably saw on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now X. But if you actually do the research, science does confirm that is not a painting, that is actually a very unique image that has lasted not for hundreds of years, but thousands of years. All things point to that being the image of someone who was crucified. I'm just trying to let you know that Jesus is real, and we need to be able to see his face. And it's hard to see in a world that doesn't even want to look at each other in the eyes. We have become so addicted to instant communication that we don't actually talk interpersonally anymore. And I got to tell you why. For me as a priest, it's kind of hard to look at people face to face when they are arrogant, when they are rude, or when they may not agree with the church's teachings. I was driving on Pratt Street, and you know how there are a ton of panhandlers there. There is one in particular who strikes me. I couldn't reach for anything quick enough to give to him, and I actually don't give money. I always have a goodie bag ready to hand to someone, and I recommend that you do that too. But this one in particular shocked me because he doesn't have a face. Literally, his face is kind of imploded. I mean, I see eyes and I can see a mouth, but he doesn't have nose and it's kind of all caved in. It is honestly shocking. You might have seen him because he's been around for a while. Do I see Jesus's face there? Because technically, when we look at another human being, whether they voted for the person you voted for, whether they might be the same skin color, whether they have a certain passport, we are technically supposed to see the vestiges, the traces, the image of God. This is our Catholic Church teaching. Can I tell you why it's difficult to see the face of Christ in even people maybe sitting next to you? I think it's because we have entered into a culture of death that doesn't want to see the face of Christ the way Elizabeth and John the Baptist in his mother's womb recognized the presence of Christ. I don't know if you realize this, but Christmas is a very pro-life celebration. It's a celebration of seeing the face of God in a poor baby. And we struggle in this contemporary world to have a dignity and a respect for other people because we have lost a dignity and respect for the face that isn't allowed to be born. I do challenge you, if you have pro-abortion, i.e., pro quote-unquote choice tendencies, to ask yourself, when you look at a sonogram of a baby's face, do you not feel the joy of John the Baptist leaping in his mother's womb? In today's world, we are taught to believe, to fear that unborn child. So Planned Parenthood, whether you agree with me or not, I'm just telling you the facts. Do not do sonograms for women to see their child's face. Because emergency pregnancy services have all confirmed that no matter the struggle of the woman, once they see that baby's face, they fall in love with that face. And they will do anything to give that child life. We no longer want to see the face of Christ. And that's why we can't recognize him in our neighbor. But we are here to try to get to know Jesus better, to learn to love him. But here's another cute little story, because there are people who actually lovingly welcome children. I don't know if you saw this, but it was a father with the mom during a sonogram. And the father was singing to the mother's belly, and the baby was clapping. And the baby smiled. As I take a look around at St. Leo's, a history of this Catholic community, I can only imagine what it was like when this church was first built. There were probably a ton of crying babies all over the place. And they were probably just hungry for the cannolis afterwards. I think what we need to do is to recognize that if we are to keep this parish, this church, our faith going strong, we need to be open to the gift of life, because that's what all of these readings are about. Being open to the gift of life. There was another video that I saw on TikTok where all truth can be found, but it was a very truthful video of how churches in Europe are closing down and being turned into mosques. And one man stood up, and again, this is not a political statement, it's just a fact. And why do I say this? Because he said something strikingly true. He said, you all Christians, go ahead, keep building your churches, because in 20 years, they will be empty because none of you are having babies. But we Muslims are. I respect what that man said. I may disagree with him theologically, but that doesn't mean that we have to have a war. But I respect that he, as a Muslim, respects the dignity of life. You know, Christian, Jews, and Muslims, we all share the Abrahamic faith. We all are connected as spiritual cousins. Again, we may disagree with each other theologically, but can we respect each other as children of God? Well, you know where that all begins? When we respect when they were conceived. In this day of our life, I want us to practice recognizing the face of God in the other. But you know where it begins? When you can look in the mirror and say, I see God's presence in me. And when we do that, we can start looking at one another with God's eyes, not just our own.